The presumed coordinator of the Paris attacks may be dead, but the manhunt continues for others. Abdelhamid Abaoud among two bodies identified in the wake of Wednesday's raid on an apartment in the suburb of Saint-Denis. How did the Belgian-Moroccan dual national turn up so close to the scene of last Friday's coordinated massacres when everyone thought he was in Syria? What was their next target? And what about the fugitives still on the loose? The manhunt continues as Parliament votes to extend a state of emergency for 3 months. One of the main issues is how far should the crackdown go on those who preach hate in radical mosques? Are leaders right to arm municipal police officers, increase web surveillance, and allow search and seizures without a court warrant? Some are calling it a French Patriot Act. To what point will security trump the rights of citizens? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at France's state of emergency. With us, centrist Senator Nathalie Goulet, who chairs the French Upper House's Commission on Jihadist Networks. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
He's a contributor to the French edition of the Huffington Post. Asif Arif directs the Religion and Secularism collection for French publishing house L'Harmattan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us from Toronto, Canada, the co-author of The Undercover Jihadi, Canadian Mubin Sheikh, who after his experience in Afghanistan today advises Canadian intelligence services, most notably on de-radicalizations. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And attorney Etienne Drouard, who knows all and tells all when it comes to things such as data protection and privacy rights. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. The body's been positively identified. It was indeed Abdelhamid Abaoud, the French Interior Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, explaining that 6 terror plots have been foiled in France since the spring, and Abdelhamid Abaoud was perhaps involved in 4 of them.
Since the spring of 2015, Abaoud has been involved in 4 of them. These elements seem to be signed with the same mode of operations. Violent acts, planned overseas, perpetrated by jihadists from European countries, trained to use weapons, then sent back to our territory to perpetrate these attacks. The investigation is, of course, still ongoing.
Nathalie Goulet, we thought he was in Syria. He shows up on Paris's doorstep in Saint-Denis. What was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I don't want to interfere in the investigation. It's not my place. But during our investigation committee, we point out a lot of, let's say, difficulties with exchanges of intelligence. And obviously something happened. And then we do not have any databases with those people.
Difficulty in exchange of information with whom?
First of all, with European country. Not with the United States, but with some European country, and then we miss some cooperation too. Obviously, something happened here.
Now, the Belgian Prime Minister, a bit angry that he gets the feeling the French are pointing the finger at him, saying, we sent you guys a note a few months ago and you didn't pick up on it.
You know, it's very difficult because sometimes those people are traveling with authentic passport, but they are not theirs passports. You know, there is a huge traffic of passport in Turkey, and then we cannot put a policeman behind everybody, and then Schengen borders are what they are. So it's quite a difficult issue, really.
Mubin Sheikh, what conclusions do you draw on this point?
Well, I mean, this is it's a problem in terms of the French situation with their Muslim population. There really is a deep-seated grievance against the marginalization, the lack of opportunities. This is not something that's going to be fixed overnight. This is going to require a really big effort on part of the government, on part of society itself.
That's the broader issue, and we'll get to that in a moment. But on the specific case here of Abdelhamid Abaoud, what are your thoughts on this dual national, Belgian-Moroccan, born in Brussels, starts off as a delinquent, is able to to wind up traveling around without being noticed, thought to be linked to many attacks, including the one on the Amsterdam-Paris train, said to be in Syria, but was in fact in France. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, this is consistent with the whole foreign fighter situation. People who have not just gone over, but one theory is, in fact, they're using other people's passports. When in the beginning, we saw a lot of these foreign fighters burning passports on video, repudiating their citizenship effectively, but nobody actually looked to check to see whose passports they're burning. So this is one thing that we saw with the Canadian individual who, he burned his passport, but he was still able to enter into other European countries, and he could only do that with another passport. That's one possible explanation as to how this guy, who was known to have gone in Syria, how he ended up where he did.
Asif Arif, your thoughts on what we've seen in the past 24 hours? We don't have confirmation that the other person killed, by the way, in Wednesday's raid was a suicide attacker. That's still being looked into. But we do know that last Friday, it was possibly a first in France's history. Suicide bombers. This is a new step for this country.
Well, yes, it has been commented by every news channel that this is the first time for France. But it's also I'm representing Ahmadiyya Muslim community here. So what I wanted to say is on behalf of Muslims, it's a pain to see that these people are claiming Islam actually to doing their acts. So actually my thoughts is to take the fact that these people are criminal. It has been doing once, but maybe it will happen again. We don't know. We need to take over these issues of radicalism, and you talk about it. I mean, we will see the broader picture of it. But what I want to say is we should act as Muslim in favor of unity, and just to say with dignity with the government, actually, and that's all what we can say tonight.
Etienne Drouard, we saw, and we'll talk about that later, the state of emergency overwhelmingly approved, France in a state of shock. Again, suicide bombers, attacks on cafes, a bloodbath at the Bataclan concert hall, the lapses that we've seen with these guys able to get under the radar of authorities. What are your reactions to those things?
The first one in relation to the state of emergency is that checks and balances will be for later, not now. Because proportionality in the investigation needs to be performed very quickly with any means available, so I have absolutely no problem with this kind of declaration. For sure, we have to think not only of the current situation, but on the future. There will be a legislative debate on that, a reform of the Constitution, and I would not like to be
Right now, there are two fugitives that are still on the run. Will this be an easier debate to have once they've been caught?
Oh, I think we won't have time for that. So there will be a majority to adopt any reform available or proposed by our government. Whatever happens, these texts will be adopted almost as they have been drafted in emergency. But as a lawyer, I think today and for the future about the way we can balance situations even when there is not such an emergency.
All right, that's a point we'll pick up on. Now, among those denouncing the attacks, the imam of a mosque in the city of Brest, who's suddenly been the focus of a lot of interest. His name is Rashid Abu Hudayfa. He's a native of that Brittany port city. This video has been making the rounds on YouTube. It shows him teaching a religious studies class where he claims that music comes from Satan, that those who listen to it will be swallowed up by the earth and transformed into monkeys and swines. Quote, he doesn't preach jihad, let's be clear about that, but does he overstep the limit when he says things like that?
I mean, well, concerning Islam, of course, when you have these kind of issues, you need to remember what the Prophet Muhammad has said about all this religion stuff. Well, this guy has a lot of publicity here in France, of course, but what we have to say and what we have to take on it is that the Holy Prophet always preached the moderation in every circumstances. So he always said, for example, that religion shall not be performed in such a harsh way that they kill your belief. Actually, it should be elastic. You need to have a moderation in what you do. So basically, when you say that, it's not only a vulgar language, but it's also not moderate. So
How should authorities be treating something like that?
I mean, there is a lot of this is the debate about what.
Do you shut down his mosque?
Well, it's a debate in between how far the free speech can go into mosques. Is this a sharing of idea, or is this more than sharing an idea? And this is actually the work of governments. This is not the work of Muslim leaders who are doing. Who has a peaceful teaching, who always spread peaceful things around their mosques, you know.
And there are 2,500 mosques in France and prayer rooms, and only a very small minority are radicalized. It's important to point that out. But again, we're talking about, and by the way, the same man is quoted by Paris Match as saying, a woman who doesn't wear the veil runs the risk of rape. What would you do about that mosque in Brest?
First of all, you point out a very important point that we also underline in our report, unfortunately without success. But we have a big problem in here to train imam and chaplain. Our clerical regulations at laicity prevents
secularism.
Secularism prevents the state to be involved in the religion, whatever is a religion, which means that normally we cannot do anything. And we have a real problem with the training of imam to know who is a right imam, as you say, and who is a Salafism and who is extremism, and who is going to do what and what kind of preach. And do we have to interfere and ask for preach in French, as the British are doing with preaching in sermon in English? Yeah. And then do we need some imam in the Minister of Interior, like in Home Office, to help the Minister of Interior and the staff to understand what happened? You know, all that, it's a debate into the debate.
And unfortunately, Islam is not a religion that's highly centralized the way the French state is.
Just a few minutes on the thought that the senator just shared with us is I just wanted to say that the leader of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which is in London, he is located in London, has said something very, I think, very smart about all this situation. He said, when you have radical mosques, you need to define, political powers needs to define what is a radical speech or what is a radical thoughts. When it's defined, you need to go and to send intelligence to these mosques. And this is not a spying. You can send some people who will monitor the sermons, who will look after these people who are being radicalized, and who will shut down these mosques.
Normally they use this kind of mosque for the intelligence to follow some connecting network or connections and know who is going to do what. You know, it's like that. But at the same time, if you shut this place down, if you close the mosque, they will go and pray somewhere else. And you have the seller in Islam, which is worse because you cannot find them.
Mubin Sheikh, you agree?
Well, this is, again, a big debate in all Western countries. Where is the line between freedom of speech and incitement? So, for example, when this imam says, things like music, there's no open prohibition on music. There's a very particular prohibition on particular types of dancing and types of music. But this is not something that it's not incitement per se. It's not criminal behavior. It's not something you can shut down. They're disgusting ideas. It does lead to dehumanization of the other, and dehumanization is one of the steps before violent extremism. So there's really nothing you can do, and I share the view of
nothing you can do. So you can't shut down that mosque in your view because it just drives them underground.
Not just that. I wanted to highlight that point that it will drive them underground. And we do have, I'm sure there's human intelligence keeping track on all these things, but more so, it's not criminal incitement. It's not criminal behavior. There's nothing you can do in that regard.
All right, far-right leader Marine Le Pen, who is riding high in the polls in this country ahead of regional elections, calling on breakfast radio this Thursday for a wholesale crackdown on Islamist radicals.
The president should not content himself with simply fighting fear. I'd like him to get to the heart of the problem and fight danger, not only terrorist threats, but also fundamentalist Islamist ideology. He should begin by closing the 100 or so Salafist mosques currently being monitored by the Interior Ministry.
Asif Arif, she calls for the closing down of Salafist mosques.
Well, it's you should take the debate. I mean, you should put this debate on the table in front of the Interior Home Office Minister, that's per se. But we should see that if these Salafist mosques are proning or are spreading some hate speech or some speech who are radical. But what is radicalism? And this is the main problem. This is the key issue of this debate. We don't know today what is a radical speech.
Nathalie Goulet, do you agree with Marine Le Pen's math that there's 100 or so mosques that need to be shut?
I don't know, but for sure there is a problem. You know, we are in a very difficult time. We face a very difficult time, and if we are talking about Islam community, communitarism, we have to have an open discussion with the Conseil français du culte musulman, and we have to discuss openly with the problems even. And the problem is that we cannot solve this question without the Muslims. We have to work together. And that is the main issue. And during my investigation committee, we wanted to open this file, and it was not possible to discuss. But then you have a lot of issues, especially radicalization in jail, how you train the chaplain, how you pay them, because it's not possible for the state to pay the chaplain, which create a lot of troubles because they are not in a number enough. You know, we need more and more, and all that. It's a full debate, and if you put the debate of the Islamic religion or Muslim religion in France, you are open to any kind of discussion, and that creates a big mess, especially before election.
All right, especially before
and
these regional elections.
we need to talk about that,
All right.
really.
We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the other measures inside of this state of emergency that's been declared for 3 months. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. It's been nearly a week since Paris was rocked by its unprecedented terror attacks. 132 killed is the latest count. This Thursday, citizens of the capital flocking once again to Place de la République to pay tributes, lay flowers, light candles. As all this is going on, a state of emergency declared extended for 3 months. We'll be talking about it with our panel in a moment, and also the manhunt, which continues. We're talking about free speech and also the need for safety. How do you mesh the two with centrist Senator Nathalie Goulet, who chairs the French Upper House's Commission on Jihadist Networks. Welcome back. Welcome back to Asif Arif, who directs the Religion and Secularism collection for French publishing house L'Harmattan. Also data protection and civil liberties attorney Etienne Drouard. And joining us from Toronto, the co-author of The Undercover Jihadi, Canadian Mubin Sheikh, who after his experience in Afghanistan today advises Canadian intelligence. We were talking before the break over what do you do when there's radical speech in mosques? Where's the line? When can you decide to shut down mosques? 40 preachers have been expelled, but those were foreign nationals. What do you do when it's an imam who is French? And France's Muslim community has been talking about it northwest of the capital. Imams met on Wednesday to discuss how to tackle this issue of homegrown radicals. Elliot Richardson has more.
Saying a prayer. Days after the terrorist attacks on the French capital, imams gathered at the mosque in Argenteuil, a meeting to call for unity among French Muslims.
What happened that night created divisions between us and our neighbours as well. We mustn't fall into the trap, and we have to preserve life together, preserve the human brotherhood.
Among the measures discussed, holding a national congress to better understand the radicalisation of the young, meetings with youths who have spent time in Syria, and one day setting up a website to fight against indoctrination.
Let's tell it like it is. It's the internet. The internet has destroyed us.
The imams called for Muslims to unite on an international level and make sure the world doesn't equate their religion with terror.
Let me ask reaction first of Mubin Sheikh here. Is the internet to blame?
Well, the internet is an amplifier of a message. It's usually not just the internet by itself. There are underlying grievances that are at play, and these young people will go online to see how to respond to those grievances. And when they do go online, they see these, Sheikh Google and Sheikh YouTube, who are telling them how to respond to it, and usually to respond to it in a violent way. So it's an amplifier, a force multiplier.
Well, yes, I think the main issue is our young people who have been being radicalized, is that they don't find any job, they don't have any good life, they don't have any aim. So first of all, we need to tackle these issues in order to prevent radicalism. And also another major point to prevent radicalism is to promote some Muslim communities who are working for peace. I mean, when you look around the media, you always see Muslims. I mean, most of the time when you see Muslim, it's in the bad shape. You always see Muslims who are doing bad stuff, or so-called Muslims who are doing bad stuff, but you never see all the message of peace, all the action.
And when the Prime Minister in Parliament said that our enemy is, quote, radical Islamism, those were his words, do you agree?
I mean, I'm familiar to what Mathieu Guidère has said this morning.
He's a French researcher.
French researcher. He said, I don't think the Prime Minister knows what is radicalism or what is Islamism. So we first need to define what is Islamism. We need to define what is radicalism. And then after we can draw the consequences of all this stuff.
Nathalie Goulet?
Well, I share part of that, but what is for sure is that all those young people, you can point out a breach of the citizen link. Those people, they don't feel citizen of the country, and we have to rebuild the link, and that will take a lot of time. And then we'll have this, as soon as you make the link between terrorism and Islam, you create the debate. And then we are not trained to know who is radical and who is not radical and who is on the verge of radicalization. How do you want the staff, the school, and everybody to be trained? So, it's a brand new subject, and we have to take it very seriously.
All right. The state of emergency, in any case, is being voted on. There are only 6 no votes this Thursday in the lower house of Parliament. The French Prime Minister, Socialist Manuel Valls, spoke to lawmakers.
We are broadening the possibility of using house arrests, and we will be targeting more than just known cases. In other words, when it is too late. We will also target threats founded on serious supposition. We will also plan coercive actions to bring people in question by force to the site of their house arrest and to deprive them of their passport and travelling papers.
The Senate has voted or votes Friday?
Tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, so how will you vote?
In favor, of course.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. This time. I didn't vote the last law on the intelligence because I thought that it was not appropriate, especially because we didn't have the money connecting to the regulation, but this time they put the money at the same time as the law. So I think that anyway it's useful. I will vote it.
Etienne Drouard, your thoughts when you see that list that was rattled off there by the Prime Minister?
I would say first that security is a matter of money, but not civil liberties.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that effectively enforcement of any law enforcement services, intelligence services is an obligation. Modernization is an obligation. Efficiency is an obligation. Professionalism is an obligation. And we see there lack of transfer of information, sharing of information, and all these questions with the level of security you can ensure to your citizen is not a matter of civil liberties. Civil liberties deal with checks and balances and controls. It doesn't mean not being efficient, not at all. The result of
So you're saying they could get the same results with warrants from a magistrate?
Right now, no.
No.
They need to go fast, and our judicial organization doesn't have the culture of these questions, which is in itself an era of legal investigation, network analysis.
So you're suggesting that part of that money should be spent on hiring more magistrates and making sure that the legal system's
Yes,
better?
the newly appointed magistrate in charge of anti-terrorism forces said, I am the first one, and I would like to have 1,000 colleagues trying to understand and being the expert in this question in the judicial sector. In fact, I would say there are 18 magistrates in France in charge of this big issue. 18.
Yeah, and Trevizik is in charge of divorce.
Now, after 10, 15 years of huge expertise from this guy,
one of the best.
He had to move.
Let me ask you, Mubin Sheikh, your thoughts on this, because we've known we're in a new era since September 11th, 2001. Why is the legal system playing catch-up still today?
Well, that's a good question. I think the legal system, by its very nature, seems to really think about matters. They're not operators. They exist in a different world in that sense. They have the luxury of going through, spending time, listening to experts, debating these issues, talking to academics who are spending years and years doing the research. It's by its very nature, it moves slowly, and that's a good thing. But just if I could just add to this debate, listen, France is at war. As far as ISIS is concerned, they are at war with France. And you simply do not have the luxury to wait around anymore.
Were those the right words to use, Etienne Trouin, by the French president, saying we're at war? Because some have criticized him, saying this is using the language that ISIS wants us to use, and that it shouldn't be treated as though we're at war as such.
I would say that he is right 14 years after George W. Bush, and this statement has absolutely no efficiency, not even on the population. So my reaction is, and so what? What are you doing? What are you about to do better, faster than before? So for me, the questions are not, do we want people to react to understand precisely the level of danger in which they are? But by putting the statement on the table, which consequence does it have on our foreign affairs policy? The means we put in justice, police, and intelligence, and how it leverages our level of efficiency. And this is not the answer to the question. So it is a way to speak, but the day after, whatever is the name you put on it, is what are you doing, and not what are you saying.
Well, but this time we are doing.
Yes,
he didn't say we are in war after Charlie.
But there's going to be as well a constitutional amendment that's being proposed?
Maybe.
Does that mean that after the 3 months are over of this state of emergency, we're going to have a permanent state?
First of all, we will see the balance and what happened in 3 months, and then to move to amend the constitution, we need three fifths of vote,
houses,
and that is not done yet. So we are not to speculate about that. But when he say, he didn't say war after Charlie. So now we were under the impression that after Charlie we got some
after
time.
The Paris attacks.
Yeah, we got some time to act and make a new law and another law, and then move slowly and slowly. But this time it's going fast, and we need to secure the population. The people, they are scared, and more than that, they start to be angry. And what will happen is that we will have, for the first time in history, as long as I can remember, election under a state of emergency, which is something very, very strange in this country.
Asif Arif, this need to go fast, you agree with it?
Yeah, well, I'm also a lawyer, so I'm very attached to the judiciary system, of course, to respecting all the liberties and everything. But yes, if we are in a state of emergency and there are people who are being killed and there is all these circumstances, yes, we need to act fast. But act fast does not mean act like stupid. We need to act in such a way that protect in what proportion we can protect it, the civil liberties still.
And is that the case?
Well, I don't have any doubt on this right now because all the operation are being are
Too early to say.
Yeah, it's too early to say. Yeah.
One person who I think would probably have voted no today is Glenn Greenwald, the reporter who first brought to light Edward Snowden's leaks about mass U.S. government surveillance. He warns against knee-jerk reactions. He spoke to France 24's Douglas Herbert.
Political scientists and philosophers have pointed this out for centuries, that fear is a weapon that governments use. And when the government puts us in fear, when we allow that to happen, we do really irrational things. We allow the government to do really destructive things, like invade Iraq, like create Gitmo in the middle of an ocean, like torture people around the world, like use drones to kill civilians that fuel ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. And I think it's our responsibility as citizens not to allow the government to manipulate and stoke our fears in order to prevent us from thinking clearly and rationally about what we want them to do.
Nathalie Goulet, are we reacting emotionally, and is this the slippery slope, the way Glenn Greenwald says?
Emotionally, for sure. I mean, we are hurt. There is no point. You know, it's a heartbreaking situation. All those young people killed. Like, of course, it's emotional, but at the same time, it's in the constitutional frame and the legal frame, and it's for 3 months. I think we are able to react and to trust the government. There is nothing. I'm sure of that.
I've tried to read this draft law rationally and not emotionally. And as a lawyer, I have some objections on the drafting of it on digital surveillance. Let me give you just a quote. If we have serious reasons to think that someone may have the behavior which could be a danger for public order, and therefore any means of investigation and data seizure is possible. Okay, if I'm drunk in the street, I'm in this definition. Okay? So in terms of peace, I would not draft it like that. But today, I will not be heard for this statement, trying to ask for a better definition of what it means, a serious reason. What is the reverse definition of a serious reason? A comic reason? So it's not time for this debate because it would be useless. There will be a huge majority on this text. But as the question, can we draft something better? Just not
Glenn
at the corner of
Greenwald
the table.
goes further in that interview with us, by the way. He says, when you look at, for instance, the Boston bombings, you have a situation where very little is done over the internet.
We already have the regulation of, in fact, I think it was 13 November 2014, which means 1 year ago. We vote a new terrorist law.
There's been 4 laws in 2 years.
Yes, and we reverse our system by incrimination of presumption, which was the first time in the history that we have that. If you are suspected to have in mind some attack, you can be under this incrimination, which was exactly the first time in our history that we reverse the rule of law. And in fact, it was just 1 year ago.
Yes, and the Conseil Constitutionnel was okay with this statement.
Constitutional Council.
Sorry. Yeah. And so if you want to prevent an action, you can wait for the action to happen. So this is very simple too. But in democracy, the question is not, does it reverse our level of values, etc.? It means we have to check people. We have to implement a committee checking that everything is going all right. And this was the debate in the intelligence law, for which we created a body with no power. But this is not for today's debate. No. This is for the debate that we will have between terrorist attacks when we are in peace.
Mubin Sheikh, when you listen to this conversation from Toronto, do you have the sense that to a certain degree, French democracy could be undermined by what's going on?
No, I don't think so. I think, the French rightfully believe that they face this very severe threat. And, in severe circumstances, you will see these extreme measures. I'm pretty sure that they're not going to be looking for drunk people who are looking to commit serious behaviors and whatnot. These are investigative aids. These are to go after a very specific group of people. I understand the fear of lawyers, and I've sat under cross-examination for 4 years, and I understand that lawyers have objections to everything. And that's good. But also keep in mind that this is serious. And I understand, we don't like to use the language of war, but sometimes, it is necessary for you to understand how the enemy thinks. Because if you continue to think through your prism and try to understand the enemy through your prism, you will continue to make analytical and operational errors again and again, and this will not keep the population safe.
Well, Mubin, let me ask you this. There's one area in which Canada is a lot more like France than the United States, and that is guns. And among the state of emergency measures, we have police officers who are allowed to take their service weapons home for the time being, and mayors that are allowed to arm municipal police. What do you think of more guns in France?
I think if the guns are with trained professionals, then I support that, absolutely.
Do you agree?
Yes, of course. I mean, when these people are coming with rifles, you will not struggle against them with a stick. I mean, this is the actual word of Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad. I mean, this is totally normal. You have a proportionate way to deal with your enemy, let's say.
Is France again, and this highlights something, doesn't it? The fact, Etienne Drouin, we may see the arming of municipal police officers. Will those guns go away? Is France going to be a little bit different in a way after all of this?
I'm sure. I'm sure that we don't know what France will be in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. This is why we are not only allowed to react on emotion because we have to, but we have to think on the future. I had 2 questions when we saw these images of children hearing at this guy saying that women were different from guys. We already have legal answers to this kind of freedom of speech issue. We already have the answers. I wouldn't like to have to find other laws on freedom of speech in order to know how to react. But we did not react. We have legal instruments for that. We did not react to these kinds of statements saying that a man is not as a woman, which is exactly contrary to some of the laws we have already in France. So when you teach that to children, about these children, what their parents were thinking by sending their children in front of this guy?
You're talking about that imam we were talking about in part 1 of our discussion.
Yeah, sorry. Exactly. And the consequences of this can be handled by law. I agree with the fact that the government doesn't have to be involved in religious question, but religion have to be involved in religious question. So you cannot just throw it to the figure of the government saying, please tell us how to think and to believe in our God, whoever is your God, and then after we'll maybe adapt our rules. These questions could be already solved with our existing legal framework, and I'm afraid that emotion creates new way to regulate freedom of speech, which would be against religions, for example. So I would not wait for...
Do you agree, Nathalie Goulet, implement the laws that are already on the books, perhaps give authorities more means before you pass new laws?
Yeah, we were just talking together, and the last anti-terrorist law was just passed 13 November 2014, which means 1 year.
And we'll have another terrorist law the next time there's another attack?
13 November.
It's not a coincidence, too.
It's just 1 year. It's an anniversary. Means that you cannot implement law and law and law if you don't practice any prevention, if you don't look at that on the society point of view, if you don't try to open books with the Muslim community, you can pass any law, it will not be efficient at all.
All right, yeah, and your reaction again, because we've been talking about it, we've gotten a lot of reactions from viewers. This one from Brave Lad. France may be entering a permanent state of emergency. This may just be the first extension in a long series, Senator.
I think we will check very carefully for any extension. This time we say that, and it's a fact that we are under emotion. But in 3 months' time, I think we will think more seriously about the redaction of the law if we have to extend it.
Nathalie Goulet, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank as well Etienne Drouard. I want to thank Asif Arif. I also want to thank for joining us from Toronto, Mubin Sheikh. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon. How are you, sir?
Very well, Francois. Just taking a look at how the debate topic has been playing out on social media, and indeed a lot of reactions to the announcement of the killing of the suspected mastermind. Bruno Leroux, a socialist MP from the Seine-Saint-Denis, congratulates the police, etc., for having successfully taken out the mastermind, but a lot of comments online are much more critical of the fact that indeed he was able to return from Syria without being picked up by the border control. So a lot of people, this is Eric Ciotti, a Conservative MP, and of course the far right is much more vocal again in saying that the fact that Abaoud was able to freely walk around or cross borders is absolute craziness in a Europe without national borders. So of course the National Front Party is in favour of leaving the European Union and returning to national borders. So this is something that plays into that argument, if you like. And indeed it appears that Abaoud, this according to Le Point, which sources an Islamic State group propaganda magazine, Dapik, he apparently said that he was able to move around freely and indeed mocked the Secret Services for this, Francois.
All right, and the story first broke in the Washington Post, I believe.
That's right, indeed. It was in the Washington Post. It was on, this is the New York Daily News. It was on their front page this morning. The fact that he had been killed in that raid. The Sun as well had it this morning. So, in fact, France and the French media came to the news relatively late. It was after the announcement of the Prime Minister before the National Assembly that French media did speak about this. Some on social media saying that the Paris prosecutor probably neglected to say this in order to give the Prime Minister the opportunity to make that announcement before the Parliament, but the English-speaking media had it already.
The official line, let me get your reaction, Etienne Drouard, is that it was, the forensics teams had to positively identify him. Do you think that the French media are right to play it cautious?
No, I do believe in this information that judges did not publish information, but it was already confirmed. Because in the other cases, the DNA analysis was performed between half a day or less than that. So they may have the answer before on the identification of this guy.
Other elements during the rounds of social media, Francois, some people worried to see images of Abaoud in propaganda videos being played in a loop on news networks such as BFM TV. You have images of him in a SOV dragging dead bodies behind. Some people saying, look, this is the sort of glory that the Islamic State group militants are seeking, and it's playing into their propaganda. Now, speaking of online propaganda and indeed misinformation as well, images such as these have been doing the rounds of social media for the last few days. It shows missiles saying "from Paris with love." Now, they are completely unverified images showing American missiles, apparently, which had been marked with this message. Now, since then, a hashtag has been launched by some pro-Islamic State Twitter accounts based in Turkey, for example, calling for a hashtag saying "to Paris with revenge." This is in response to what are probably fake images of US missiles marked with "from Paris with love." So you can see the way in which these things get out of hand,
and you're saying
based on no fact whatever.
And you're saying that the state of emergency playing out on social media with a clampdown on certain websites, certain accounts.
That's right, and indeed this one account that I just saw active about 1 hour ago has since been shut down because of the state of emergency laws that allow the authorities to clamp down on pro-Islamic State group sites. But indeed this site was propagating "to Paris with revenge" or something like that, hashtags of that nature, Francois.
All right, many thanks for that, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.